When the manager tore Joan's shirt off in front of the entire diner, people laughed. They filmed it. They watched a 19-year-old girl get humiliated and did nothing. But then someone noticed the tattoo across her back, a winged skull wrapped in flames. The manager's face drained of color. He knew that symbol. The next morning, when the diner doors opened, a line of motorcycles sat outside. Silent. Waiting. Joan's father had arrived. And Mark was about to learn that some people you just don't touch. Before we continue, please subscribe to this channel and let us know in the comments where you are watching from. Enjoy the story. The morning begins the way it always does on Maple Street, with the soft rattle of delivery trucks and the smell of coffee drifting out onto the sidewalk before the sun is fully awake. Inside the Maple Street diner, Joan is already moving. She has been here since before dawn, tying her apron the same way she has for years, smoothing the wrinkles out of her uniform as if they matter more than they do. For Joan, routine is not boredom. It is stability. It is survival. She wipes down the counter carefully, even the spots no one ever notices. The register drawer sticks, so she nudges it closed with her hip, muscle memory guiding her more than thought. When the first regulars arrive, she greets them by name, already pouring coffee before they sit. She knows who takes cream, who doesn't. She knows who wants to talk and who wants silence with their eggs. There is an ease to her movements, a quiet competence that comes from years of showing up no matter what kind of night came before. Joan works hard, but more than that, she works kindly. When a customer snaps at her over toast that's too dark, she apologizes anyway, even though she didn't cook it. When an elderly man drops his fork, she bends down without a word and replaces it, smiling as if it's no trouble at all. The diner runs on this unspoken understanding. People come in carrying their lives with them, and Joan makes space for that. It's what she does best. From the back of the room, Mark watches. At first, he seems like any other manager. He checks the seating chart, adjusts the thermostat, straightens a crooked menu. But there's a sharpness to the way his eyes move, especially when they land on Joan. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't have to. His control shows itself in quieter ways. A comment about how a table should have been cleared faster. A reminder that breaks are timed. A correction delivered with a thin smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Joan notices, but she doesn't react. She's learned how to absorb small discomforts and keep going. She nods when Mark speaks, says yes, and of course, even when she knows she hasn't done anything wrong. Around them, the diner hums with ordinary life. Plates clatter. Coffee refills happen without being asked for. Laughter breaks out at a booth near the window. Everything feels normal. Almost. But something has shifted, even if Joan can't fully name it yet. Mark's attention lingers. When she walks from the counter to the kitchen, she feels it on her back, like a weight. When she makes a tiny mistake, forgetting a side of hash browns, mishearing an order, Mark is suddenly there, pointing it out with exaggerated patience. Other staff members notice, exchanging glances but saying nothing. In a place like this, you learn quickly when silence is safer. The unease creeps in slowly, threading itself through the ordinary rhythm of the day. Joan's smile tightens just a little. Her shoulders stay tense even when the rush dies down. She tells herself she's imagining it, that she's just tired, that everyone has off days. She focuses on her work, because work has always been something she can control. And then, without warning, the past intrudes. That was the day everything changed. It had started like any other shift. Mark had lingered after closing, leaning against the counter while Joan wiped it down. His voice had been casual, almost friendly, as he complimented her dedication, her smile, the way customers responded to her. Then his tone shifted. He stood a little too close. His words crossed a line that Joan felt instantly, deep in her chest. She remembers the exact moment she said no. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. She simply told him she wasn't interested and asked him to step back. For a second, Mark's expression froze, as if his face hadn't yet decided how to respond. Then his smile disappeared. In its place was something colder, something calculating. And from then on, he watched her like a predator. Back in the present, Mark's gaze follows Joan as she refills a cup of coffee. He notes how long it takes her to return to the register. He corrects her in front of customers for things he would normally ignore. Each interaction is small enough to be dismissed, but together they form a pattern, one that tightens around Joan with every passing hour. She has no idea what's coming. She can't see how far this will go, how cruel it will become, how public it will be. She only knows that the air feels heavier, that the diner no longer feels entirely safe, and that Mark's eyes never seem to leave her. Joan had no idea that her refusal would lead to the worst day of her life and the best day of her life. For now, all she can do is keep moving, keep serving, keep smiling. The plates still need to be cleared. The coffee still needs to be hot. And the world, at least on the surface, continues as if nothing is wrong at all. By midday, the Maple Street diner transforms. The quiet comfort of morning evaporates under the weight of the lunch rush. The bell above the door rings constantly, a sharp metallic chime cutting through the air. Chairs scrape. Orders are shouted from tables to the counter, from the counter to the kitchen. Plates stack up faster than they can be cleared, and the smell of grease, coffee, and perfume mixes into something heavy and suffocating. Joan is in the center of it, moving faster now, her steps shorter, more urgent. Sweat gathers at the base of her neck beneath the collar of her uniform. Her pen smears ink across her order pad as she scribbles, flips pages, tears slips free and passes them back without slowing. A customer waves for a refill. Another complains about the wait. Someone laughs too loudly at a joke that isn't funny. The noise presses in from every direction, relentless, demanding. Mark patrols the floor like a warden. His voice cuts through the chaos, sharp and impatient, correcting a server here, snapping his fingers there. Every time he passes Joan, his presence feels deliberate, invasive. He doesn't help. He watches. He waits. The pressure builds until even Joan's practiced calm begins to fray. At table 12, the mistake happens. It's small, almost insignificant in the rush. A turkey sandwich is delivered instead of roast beef. The customer frowns, confused, glancing down at the plate, and then back up at Joan. Joan apologizes immediately, her voice steady, already reaching to take the plate away. She promises to fix it, promises it will only take a minute. Mark sees it. He storms across the floor, his chair scraping loudly as he shoves it aside. His face is already flushed, jaw clenched tight, as if he's been waiting for an excuse. He doesn't lower his voice. He doesn't pull Joan aside. He stops directly in front of her, blocking her path, making sure everyone can hear. "How many times do I have to tell you to pay attention?" he snaps. The diner seems to shrink around them. Conversations falter. Heads turn. Joan tries to explain, but Mark cuts her off, his words tumbling out faster, louder, harsher. He accuses her of incompetence, of embarrassing him, of slowing down the entire operation. The punishment does not fit the crime, and everyone can see it. Joan stands there, holding the wrong plate, absorbing every word. Her cheeks burn, but she doesn't cry. She doesn't argue. She says she's sorry again, quietly, and turns to fix the mistake. That should have been the end of it. It isn't. Mark reaches out. In one abrupt, violent motion, he grabs the front of Joan's uniform shirt and yanks. Fabric tears with a sound that is unmistakable, loud enough to cut through the clatter of dishes and the hiss of the grill. Buttons pop free and skitter across the floor. The force pulls Joan forward before she can catch herself, exposing her undershirt, her collarbone, the vulnerability she has spent years learning how to hide. For a heartbeat, no one breathes. Then the reaction ripples outward, ugly and electric. Someone laughs, a sharp, nervous sound. A phone appears, then another, screens glowing as people raise them to capture the moment. Whispers spread from booth to booth, a low, buzzing murmur of shock and disbelief. A man near the window mutters something under his breath. A woman covers her mouth with her hand, eyes wide. Mark keeps shouting, spittle at the corner of his mouth, his face twisted with rage and something darker beneath it. He gestures at Joan like she's an object, like she exists only to be corrected, controlled, broken down in front of an audience. Joan does not move. She stands perfectly still in the center of the diner, her torn shirt hanging awkwardly, her hands at her sides. She doesn't try to cover herself. She doesn't run. She lifts her head and looks straight ahead, her expression unreadable. There is no pleading in her eyes, no collapse into shame. Only a quiet, immovable dignity that makes the moment even more uncomfortable. The chaos drains away as suddenly as it arrived. The clatter fades. The laughter dies mid-breath. Even Mark's voice falters, trailing off into the heavy silence that fills the room. In that stillness, something changes. Mark's eyes drop from Joan's face. They move slowly, unwillingly, down her back, and what he sees there makes the blood drain from his face. The diner remains frozen, suspended in that moment where no one quite understands what has shifted, only that it has. The phones are still raised, but forgotten. The whispers stop. The air feels thick, charged, as if everyone senses that the balance of power has tilted, just slightly, in a way it cannot recover from. Joan remains where she is, breathing evenly, waiting. If you've ever been humiliated by someone in power, if you've ever watched someone abuse their authority and felt helpless, hit that subscribe button right now. Because people like Mark need to be exposed. And this story is about to get very, very satisfying. The silence stretches, heavy and unnatural, until it forces attention to the one thing no one had noticed before. As Joan stands there, unmoving, the torn fabric of her shirt shifts just enough to reveal the skin beneath. Along her upper back, just below the collar line, ink emerges into view, dark, deliberate, impossible to ignore once seen. It is a tattoo unlike anything you would expect on a quiet diner waitress. A winged skull dominates the center, its hollow eyes staring outward, framed by broad, detailed wings that curve across her shoulders. Flames rise from beneath it, not wild or chaotic, but controlled, almost ceremonial, each line precise. Beneath the skull, woven subtly into the design, sits a patch symbol, simple in shape, unmistakable in meaning to those who know it. It isn't flashy. It doesn't need to be. The diner doesn't understand what it's seeing. To them, it's just ink. Maybe a bold choice. Maybe a rebellious streak they never guessed Joan had. A few people squint, trying to make sense of it, whispering guesses that miss the mark entirely. Someone shrugs. Someone else lowers their phone, disappointed that the spectacle has lost momentum. But Mark understands. The change in him is immediate and unmistakable. His posture stiffens, then collapses inward, as if the air has been punched out of his chest. The anger drains from his face, replaced by something closer to fear. His mouth opens, then closes again. He takes a step back without realizing he's doing it, his heel bumping into a chair. His eyes are locked on the tattoo now, not with dominance, not with ownership, but with recognition. Because that symbol is not decorative. It is not random. In certain circles of this city, circles that operate in shadows and whispers, that image carries weight. It speaks a language Mark never expected to hear spoken here, in a diner filled with chipped mugs and laminated menus. The room remains confused, but the tension sharpens. People sense that something important has just happened, even if they can't explain it. The laughter from moments ago feels obscene now, a memory everyone wants to forget. Joan still hasn't moved. She lets the silence do the work for her. That wasn't just a tattoo. It was a family crest, a warning, a promise. And in the underground world of this city, that symbol meant untouchable. Mark swallows hard. His hands, which had been clenched in rage, now hang uselessly at his sides. He glances around the diner, as if suddenly aware of witnesses, of walls that might listen, of consequences that extend far beyond this room. The power he thought he had slips away from him piece by piece, replaced by the dawning realization that he has made a catastrophic mistake. Remember when Joan said no to him? When she calmly, simply rejected his advances. Mark thought he was punishing a powerless waitress, someone who needed this job too badly to fight back. He thought humiliation would teach her a lesson. He had no idea he was targeting a protected princess. The irony is cruel. Everything he believed about her, her silence, her politeness, her willingness to endure, he mistook for weakness. He never considered that restraint could be a choice. That kindness could be discipline. That survival sometimes means waiting until the other person reveals exactly who they are. Joan finally moves. She reaches up slowly, deliberately, and pulls what remains of her torn shirt together. Her hands do not shake. She smooths the fabric as best she can, reclaiming herself inch by inch. When she straightens, she does so fully, her spine aligned, her presence suddenly undeniable. The diner watches, rapt now, though they still don't understand why their instincts are screaming that something irreversible has occurred. Mark forces a laugh, thin and brittle, trying to patch over the fear clawing its way into his voice. It sounds wrong even to him. Before he can say anything else, Joan speaks. Her voice is calm, quiet, perfectly controlled. My father will hear about this. The words land heavier than any scream ever could. Mark's laugh dies in his throat. He opens his mouth, searching for a response that doesn't exist. He tells himself it's nothing, that it's a bluff, that he's still in control. But his eyes betray him, flicking once more to the tattoo, to the symbol he knows he cannot outrun. Comment, justice for Joan. If you believe bullies deserve what's coming to them, let's show these power-hungry managers that we're not staying silent. Joan doesn't wait for a reply. She doesn't need one. The damage is already done. Mark just doesn't know how bad it's going to be yet. The drive home feels longer than it ever has. Joan keeps both hands on the steering wheel, knuckles pale, eyes fixed on the road as the city slides past her in a blur of traffic lights and storefronts. The radio is off. She can't tolerate noise right now. Every sound feels like too much, every thought arriving all at once, uninvited and sharp. Her torn shirt is folded carefully on the passenger seat, as if it's something fragile. She keeps glancing at it, then away again. The humiliation replays in fragments, the ripping sound, the phones, the laughter that stopped too late. Her chest tightens, not with fear anymore, but with something heavier. Anger, maybe. Or grief for the version of herself who thought endurance was the same thing as safety. She tells herself she did nothing wrong. She repeats it silently, over and over, like a mantra. Still, doubt tries to creep in, the old familiar voice asking whether she should have spoken up sooner, whether staying quiet made it worse. By the time she turns off the main road and onto the long, private drive that leads home, her jaw aches from clenching it. The compound comes into view gradually, set back from the road, shielded by iron gates and tall trees that have stood there longer than most people in the city. The gate opens without her stopping. It always does. The gravel crunches beneath her tires as she pulls in, the familiar sound grounding her in a way she didn't realize she needed. Here, the world feels different. Joan parks and sits for a moment, breathing. This place has never been a cage to her. It has always been a refuge, one she chose to step away from in order to build a life that was her own. Stepping back into it now doesn't feel like failure. It feels like coming home wounded and being allowed to heal. The door opens before she can knock. Her father stands there, already waiting. Lundy doesn't rush toward her. He doesn't raise his voice or ask frantic questions. He simply looks at her, and something in his expression shifts, subtle, controlled, but unmistakable. He is a man whose power has never needed to announce itself. It lives in stillness, in restraint, in the way others instinctively make space when he enters a room. To the world, he is a feared leader. To Joan, he is first and always her father. She steps inside, the door closing softly behind her. The quiet is thick, protective. For a moment, neither of them speaks. Lundy studies her face, the way parents do when they're reading injuries that aren't visible. He notices the stiffness in her shoulders, the careful way she moves. Without a word, Joan reaches for the folded shirt and holds it out. The fabric unfurls between them, the tear obvious, violent, impossible to explain away. For the first time since leaving the diner, Joan feels her throat tighten. She waits for the explosion, for shouting, for rage. It doesn't come. Lundy's reaction is slower, far more dangerous. His jaw sets. A muscle ticks once near his temple. His hands curl into fists, then relax again. The fury is there, but it is disciplined, leashed by decades of control. He looks up at her, eyes dark, searching her face not for details, but for consent. He asks just one question. What's his name? Joan tells him. And in that moment, Mark's fate is sealed. He just doesn't know it yet. If you stand against workplace harassment, smash that like button. Every like is a vote that says, this stops now. Let's send a message. Lundy nods once, the name locking into place in his mind. He gestures for Joan to sit, pours her a glass of water with hands that are steady again. Only when she's settled does he speak, his voice low, measured. She begins to tell him what happened, but he stops her gently, raising a hand. I know, he says. The words catch her off guard. She looks at him, confused. What Joan didn't know was that her father had been watching. Not in secret cameras or shadows, but through people, through patterns, through instincts honed over a lifetime of understanding how men like Mark operate. He knew about the comments, the pressure, the way authority can be weaponized quietly, plausibly, until the victim doubts herself. He had been waiting for Joan to come to him. waiting for her to decide that she didn't have to carry it alone. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about teaching Joan she was never powerless. Lundy tells her that he could have intervened earlier, could have ended it before it escalated. But he didn't want to take her agency away. He wanted her to know that choosing help is not weakness, and that protection is not the same thing as control. Joan listens, something in her chest loosening for the first time that day. She isn't being scolded. She isn't being rescued against her will. She is being backed, fully and without condition. She leans back, exhaustion finally catching up to her, and lets herself rest in the certainty that whatever comes next, she will not face it alone. That evening, Mark sits alone in his living room, the television flickering with a show he isn't really watching. His shoes are kicked off, a beer sweating onto the coffee table. To anyone looking in from the outside, he appears relaxed, even satisfied. The day, in his mind, ended without consequences. Joan didn't scream. She didn't call the police. No one stepped in. He tells himself that means he won. He replays the scene with selective memory, sanding down the edges until he is the one who looks wronged. She embarrassed him, he thinks. She made him lose control. That's how it always goes in his head. Accountability never sticks because he refuses to let it. The laughter, the phones, the torn shirt. He reframes it all as a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. This isn't new for him. There have been others before Joan. Not always as dramatic, not always as public, but similar enough to form a pattern. A waitress who quit suddenly. A hostess who asked for a transfer. Complaints that went nowhere because Mark knew how to walk the line just well enough. He had learned that authority, when used carefully, could be its own shield. People didn't want trouble, and Mark was very good at making sure trouble followed anyone who challenged him. He takes a long drink and smirks to himself. Tomorrow, he'll act normal. Maybe even generous. He's done it before. The world has a short memory. Then his phone buzzes. The number is unfamiliar. He lets it ring out, annoyance flickering across his face. A few seconds later, it buzzes again. Different number. Same result. By the third call, his smirk has faded. He silences the phone and tosses it onto the couch, telling himself it's spam, nothing more. Outside, an engine growls. Mark glances toward the window just in time to see the slow roll of a motorcycle passing his house. Too slow. The rider doesn't look over, doesn't need to. The sound lingers even after it's gone, echoing in a way Mark can't quite shake. He stands, peers through the blinds, then feels foolish for doing so. His phone lights up again, this time with a text from a colleague. "Hey man," it reads. "Weird thing. Saw some rough-looking guys earlier today asking about the diner. You know anything about that?" Mark's stomach tightens. He types a response, deletes it, then settles on something casual. "No idea," he writes. Probably nothing. He tells himself that, too. Probably nothing. But the word probably sticks with him. He moves around the house restlessly now, checking locks that were never unlocked, jumping slightly when the refrigerator clicks on. The confidence he carried home with him has thinned, stretched tight by a sense he doesn't want to name. Somewhere else in the city, preparation is already underway. This is where the pace shifts, where the noise of Mark's anxious thoughts gives way to something quieter, more deliberate. Lundy stands at the head of a long table, hands resting flat on its surface. Around him are men and women bound not by impulse, but by loyalty and shared rules. This is not a mob. It is a brotherhood that understands restraint as strength. Voices are low. Information moves efficiently, passed without embellishment. Names, dates, records, employment histories, prior complaints that were buried, settlements that never made headlines, patterns that only become visible when someone knows where to look. Phones are not used to threaten, but to document. Emails are drafted. Calls are scheduled. This wasn't about beating Mark down. Lundy had something far more permanent in mind. He listens more than he speaks, absorbing the full picture before giving direction. When he does speak, it is precise. There will be no shortcuts. No intimidation that can be traced back to anger. Everything must be clean, legal, unavoidable. This is how power is dismantled properly. Back in Mark's house, sleep refuses to come. He lies awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the look on Joan's face, then the words she said. "My father will hear about this." He had laughed, hadn't he? Or tried to. The sound echoes now in a way that makes his chest tighten. Another motorcycle passes outside, or maybe it's the same one. He can't be sure. His phone buzzes once more, an unknown number leaving a voicemail he doesn't yet have the courage to check. Subscribe if you believe in justice over violence, because what happens next is better than any fistfight. Mark doesn't know it yet, but the walls he thought protected him are already closing in, built not from threats or fists, but from truth, exposure, and consequences that can't be outrun. By the next day, the story is no longer contained within the walls of the Maple Street diner. It moves the way these things always do at first, quietly, sideways, passed in fragments between people who trust each other. A text sent after a shift, a hushed conversation in a back hallway, a pause mid-sentence, followed by, "Did you hear what Mark did?" Details vary at first. Some get it wrong, some soften it, but the core remains the same, and it's enough to unsettle anyone who hears it. A manager crossed a line so obvious that no amount of spin can erase it. Joan's name comes up again and again, spoken carefully, with a mix of concern and guilt from people who realize, too late, that they saw the warning signs and did nothing. Then something unexpected happens. Others begin to talk. A server admits that Mark used to stand too close, that he commented on her body when no one else was around. A former hostess, who quit months earlier without explanation, finally explains why. A cook remembers how Mark would single out certain staff, how he seemed to enjoy making them uncomfortable, watching their reactions like it was a private game. Individually, these stories were easy to dismiss. Together, they form a pattern that is impossible to ignore. The diner feels different now. Conversations stop when Mark enters a room. Eyes linger on him in a way they never did before, not with respect or fear, but with scrutiny. He senses it immediately. The jokes don't land. The easy authority he once carried feels brittle, unreliable. The turning point comes when the owner finds out. He doesn't hear it through gossip. He hears it through a call, measured, serious, impossible to brush off. By the time he arrives at the diner, the staff are already on edge, watching him closely as he heads straight for the back office. He asks one question. "Show me the footage." The security system is old but functional. Cameras cover the floor, the counter, the register. He rewinds, watches the lunch rush unfold at high speed, the familiar chaos of his business playing out like it has 1,000 times before. Then he slows it down. He sees Joan at table 12. The wrong plate. The apology. He sees Mark approach, already angry. The owner leans closer to the screen, his brow furrowing as Mark's body language grows aggressive. He expects yelling. He does not expect what comes next. The tearing fabric makes him flinch even though there is no sound. He watches it again, then again, disbelief giving way to something heavier. Horror, anger, responsibility. He pauses the footage on the moment Joan stands still, torn shirt hanging, dignity intact. He sits back in his chair, hands pressed flat against the desk, breathing slowly as if to keep himself from exploding. This happened in his business. Under his roof. On his watch. Out on the floor, staff wait. No one jokes. No one checks their phone. They don't need to ask what he saw. The answer is written on his face when he finally steps back out. Remember how Mark smiled when Joan flinched? How he enjoyed the power. Every witness was now remembering, and they were all talking. The owner doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't make a speech. He tells Mark to leave for the day. Then he tells him not to come back until further notice. The words are calm, but final enough to land like a blow. Mark tries to protest, but the owner doesn't engage. He's already made the decision that matters most. By evening, the story has escaped the diner entirely. It moves through the neighborhood, through industry circles, through people who know people. Messages are sent. Screenshots shared. Someone who used to laugh off Mark's behavior now feels embarrassed they ever did. Mark feels the shift before he fully understands it. His phone won't stop buzzing. Calls he doesn't recognize. Messages that don't explain themselves. A friend cancels plans without offering a reason. Another doesn't respond at all. He scrolls through his missed calls as night falls. 17 by the time midnight arrives. By morning, his entire life would change. And it wouldn't be because of violence. It would be because of something far worse, accountability. The night stretches on without mercy. Mark lies in bed staring at the ceiling, eyes dry and burning, his mind refusing to slow. Every time he closes his eyes, the diner comes back to him. The silence, the way the room turned, the look on Joan's face when she said those words. He shifts, throws the covers off, then pulls them back on. as if any position might quiet the dread crawling through his chest. It doesn't. He gets up again and paces the house, barefoot on cold floors. The familiar space feels wrong now, exposed. Every shadow seems to hold intention. He checks the locks twice, then a third time, even though he knows they're fine. His phone sits on the counter like a threat, face down, silent at last, but impossible to ignore. He keeps seeing the tattoo, the winged skull, the flames, the symbol beneath it. At first, he had told himself it was nothing, just ink, a coincidence. But the look on his face back at the diner betrays what his mouth refuses to admit. He recognized it, or at least, he recognized enough to be afraid. Mark opens his laptop. The glow of the screen fills the room as he types hesitantly at first, then faster. He searches combinations of words he never expected to type together. Winged skull, patch symbol, city name. Most results are meaningless. Generic images. Tattoo forms. People guessing, speculating. Then he narrows it. The moment it appears, his breath catches. The symbol isn't popular. It doesn't show up on merchandise or trend pages. It lives in old articles, archived reports, and forums where usernames speak in code. He clicks one link, then another, heart pounding harder with every scroll. It's real, not a myth, not a rumor. The tattoo isn't just a design. It's a marker, a declaration of belonging to something that doesn't advertise itself and doesn't need to. A family crest passed down, recognized quietly by those who understand what it represents. Protection, reach, memory. Mark leans back from the screen, suddenly aware of how fast his heart is racing. His mouth feels dry. He stands, walks to the sink, drinks water straight from the tap, spilling some down his chin without caring. His hands are shaking now, badly enough that he has to grip the counter. The truth settles in slowly, cruelly. Joan wasn't bluffing. The realization cracks something open inside him, and panic rushes in to fill the space. He replays every decision he made, every word he said, every moment he enjoyed pushing someone smaller than him. He sees it now with brutal clarity. Not strength, not authority, just borrowed power, propped up by silence and fear. And silence has a way of ending. He checks his phone again. More missed calls. A voicemail he still hasn't listened to. He imagines voices on the other end, calm and polite, saying things that don't sound like threats but feel worse than any. He imagines his name being spoken in rooms he's never been allowed into. For the first time, a thought he's never seriously considered crosses his mind. He could leave. He could pack a bag, drive until the city disappears behind him, start over somewhere no one knows his name. He opens a drawer and pulls out a duffel bag, sets it on the bed. The sight of it sends a jolt of adrenaline through him, sharp and desperate. But where do you run when you've disrespected a man who owns loyalty across 3 states? The question answers itself before he finishes thinking it. Running wouldn't erase what he did. It wouldn't stop what's already in motion. It would only confirm his guilt to people who already know the truth. Mark sinks onto the edge of the bed, head in his hands. The house is silent except for the faint hum of electricity in the walls. He feels very small now, stripped of the confidence that once made him feel untouchable. The authority he relied on exists only in certain rooms, under certain conditions. Outside of that, he is just another man with a history, one that can be examined, documented, and dismantled. What Mark didn't understand was that Lundy wasn't coming for his body. He was coming for everything Mark had built his false power on. His job, his reputation, the quiet arrangements that let him get away with things. And when morning came, the whole city would watch it crumble. Mark closes the laptop without shutting it down, as if that might somehow stop what he's seen. He lies back on the bed, staring at the ceiling again, waiting for sleep that will not come. Outside, the night keeps moving toward dawn, indifferent to his fear. Justice doesn't need to hurry. It already knows where he is. Morning returns to the Maple Street diner with a fragile sense of normalcy. The sun rises the way it always does, casting pale light across the cracked sidewalk and the familiar windows. Staff begin to arrive one by one, keys jingling, shoulders tense. No one jokes. No one lingers outside. Yesterday hangs in the air, unspoken but heavy, shaping every movement. Inside, chairs are flipped down. Coffee machines warm up. The routine resumes, but the ease is gone. People avoid certain corners of the room, avoid each other's eyes. Everyone knows today is different. No one knows exactly why yet, only that something is coming. Then the sound begins. At first it's distant, barely noticeable, a low vibration carried on the morning air. It grows steadily, not frantic or aggressive, but purposeful. The kind of sound that announces itself without needing to hurry. Conversations trail off. A server pauses mid-step, listening. The motorcycles arrive as one. 8 bikes roll into view and slow to a stop outside the diner, engines cutting almost simultaneously. The silence that follows is immediate and absolute. The riders don't dismount right away. They sit still, helmets on, bodies relaxed but alert, as if waiting for a signal that doesn't need to be spoken. At the front is Lundy. He swings one leg off his bike and stands, removing his helmet with deliberate calm. He doesn't scan the area. He doesn't posture. He simply exists there, solid and unhurried, his presence bending the space around him. The others follow his lead, forming a quiet line beside him. They don't storm the diner. They don't raise their voices. They wait. Inside, the staff freeze. Someone whispers a name they shouldn't know, but somehow do. A coffee cup rattles as a hand trembles. Every instinct tells them this isn't random. This isn't noise for the sake of fear. This is something else. Something organized. The perspective shifts now, narrowing, tightening. Mark stands behind the counter, pretending to review paperwork he hasn't read all morning. His sleep-deprived eyes lift at the change in sound, his body reacting before his mind fully catches up. He turns slowly toward the window and sees them. The color drains from his face. His mouth opens slightly, then closes. His chest tightens, breath shallow and quick. The recognition hits him all at once, not as panic, but as certainty. This is real. This is happening. This is not something he can talk his way out of. His legs feel weak. He grips the edge of the counter to steady himself, knuckles whitening. The room feels too small now, the walls too close. He is acutely aware of every sound inside his own body, his heartbeat, the rush of blood in his ears. Outside, Lundy checks his watch. Still, no one moves. The power on display isn't in motion. It's in restraint. It's in the fact that nothing needs to be forced. The message has already been delivered by their presence alone. People passing by on the street slow down, sensing the shift, instinctively understanding that this is not spectacle, it's consequence. Inside the diner, whispers spread like static. That's him. Oh my God, why are they here? Mark swallows hard, eyes flicking from face to face. No one meets his gaze now. The authority he once enjoyed dissolves completely in that moment, replaced by something colder and far more isolating. The same diner that laughed at Joan yesterday goes completely silent today. Not because of violence, because of presence. Lundy finally steps forward, opening the door himself. The bell above it rings softly, almost politely. He enters alone. The others remain outside, exactly where they are. He doesn't look around the room. He doesn't need to. His eyes go straight to Mark. There is no hatred in his expression. No rage. Just focus. The staff instinctively step back, creating space without being told. Mark's throat tightens as Lundy approaches, each step measured, controlled. He stops a few feet away, close enough that Mark can feel the weight of his attention without a single word being spoken. If you're loving this, comment, respect is earned, and share this video with someone who needs to see it. Let's make Mark's lesson go viral. Lundy stands there, hands relaxed at his sides, the embodiment of patience and inevitability. Mark's entire body feels like it's vibrating, every nerve screaming at him to run, to speak, to do something. But there is nowhere to go, and nothing left to say. The reckoning has arrived, not with chaos, not with fists or threats, but with a calm so absolute it leaves no room for denial. Lundy enters the diner alone. The door closes softly behind him, the bell giving a single, polite chime that feels almost out of place in the heavy stillness. The Brotherhood remains outside, exactly where they are, not as backup, not as a threat, but as a boundary. This is deliberate. This is personal. And this is enough. Lundy walks a few steps in and stops. He doesn't rush. He doesn't loom. His posture is relaxed, hands loose at his sides, as if he stepped into a room where the outcome is already decided and there's no need to force it along. Mark stands behind the counter, frozen. His mouth is dry. His instincts tell him to speak first, to explain, to minimize, but nothing comes out. Words feel useless now. Excuses even more so. Lundy's voice, when he finally speaks, is calm and quiet. Not the kind of quiet that hides anger, but the kind that comes from certainty. "You embarrassed my daughter," he says simply. There is no accusation in the tone, just a statement of fact. Mark swallows. He nods once, reflexively, as if agreeing might soften what's coming. It doesn't. Lundy continues, his eyes never leaving Mark's face. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need witnesses to hear him clearly. "You did it publicly. You did it on camera. And you did it after she told you no." Mark's hands tremble now. He opens his mouth, but Lundy lifts a finger, not threatening, not sharp, just enough to stop him. "This isn't a conversation," Lundy says. "This is an explanation." He shifts slightly, angling his body so Mark can't mistake the seriousness of what follows. "Every business owner in this town knows what you did. Not rumors. Not gossip. Facts. They've seen the footage." Mark's breath catches. His chest tightens. Lundy goes on. "That footage doesn't show a mistake. It doesn't show a bad day. It shows a pattern. And patterns travel." He lets that settle before continuing. "Former employees are filing complaints. Some already have. Others are finally comfortable speaking because they're not alone anymore." Mark shakes his head faintly, panic bleeding into his expression. I didn't." Lundy doesn't interrupt him this time. He just waits. The silence does the work. Mark's words collapse under their own weight and trail off into nothing. "The diner owner has already decided your fate," Lundy says, almost gently. "You don't work here anymore. And you won't be working anywhere like this again." That lands harder than anything else. Mark grips the counter as if it might anchor him, his knuckles white, his shoulders caving inward. The room feels like it's tilting. Everything he built his identity on, authority, control, reputation, is unraveling thread by thread. Lundy watches him with the detachment of someone observing a consequence unfold exactly as expected. Then comes the twist Mark has been bracing for and dreading all at once. Lundy steps closer, not aggressively, just enough to make sure Mark hears what comes next clearly. "I'm not going to touch you," he says. Mark looks up, confused, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. "You're not worth the dirt under my daughter's boots." Lundy continues, his voice steady. "I don't need to hurt you, Mark. Your own actions already did that. I'm just here to make sure everyone knows who you really are." The words are devastating precisely because they aren't dramatic. There is no threat, no promise of pain, just exposure, just truth, laid bare and irreversible. This is more satisfying than violence. Because violence ends. Accountability follows you. Mark's shoulders sag. The fight drains out of him completely, replaced by the hollow realization that there is nothing left to argue, nothing left to deny. He has been seen. Fully. And once that happens, there's no putting the mask back on. Lundy straightens, the conversation clearly over. He hasn't raised his voice once. He hasn't needed to. The power shift is absolute and unmistakable. As he turns to leave, he pauses for just a moment. "If you ever speak my daughter's name again," he says calmly, "it won't be to me." He doesn't explain what that means. He doesn't have to. Lundy walks to the door and opens it. The bell rings again, softly, as if marking the end of something rather than the beginning of anything new. Outside, the Brotherhood waits, still and patient. Lundy steps back into their line, and together they turn away. Mark is left alone behind the counter, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. Hit subscribe if you believe the best revenge is living well and making sure bullies face real consequences. The decision is no longer theoretical. It moves quickly now, with the efficiency of something that should have happened sooner. The diner owner stands near the counter, shoulders squared, voice steady but final. He doesn't argue. He doesn't negotiate. He states the facts plainly, as if reading them aloud makes them impossible to twist. Mark's employment is terminated, effective immediately. There is no appeal, no second chance, no quiet resignation that allows him to save face. Mark hears the words, but they seem to arrive late, echoing through a space in his mind that is already collapsing. Fired. The title he used as armor is gone, stripped away in a single sentence. He tries to speak, to object, but the owner is already finished. The conversation has moved past him. Then comes the next step. The call to the police is made without drama. No raised voices. No spectacle. Just a phone lifted, a report given, the word assault, spoken with clarity and precision. Mark flinches when he hears it. Assault. The word feels heavier than anything else so far because it carries weight beyond reputation. It carries record. Consequence that follows you into rooms that don't care who you thought you were. The weight is short but excruciating. Mark stands off to the side now, no longer behind the counter, no longer in charge of anything. His hands twitch uselessly at his sides. He avoids looking at the staff, at the customers who have quietly gathered, drawn by the gravity of the moment. No one speaks to him. No one laughs. No one offers comfort. When the officers arrive, they are calm and professional. They ask questions. They already know what they need to know. The footage has been reviewed. Statements have been taken. This isn't chaos. It's procedure. Mark is informed that he is being escorted out. As they lead him toward the door, the space seems to widen, creating a corridor of silence. Every step feels louder than the last, his shoes scuffing against the floor that once felt like his domain. He keeps his head down, but he can feel the weight of eyes on him, not angry, not cruel. Just aware. Outside, the Brotherhood is still there. They haven't moved. They haven't spoken. They don't need to. Mark stops short when he sees them lined up along the sidewalk. 8 figures, steady and unmoving, watching him approach. No one steps forward. No one blocks his path. They don't touch him. They don't threaten him. They simply look at him, and in that look is the full measure of what he lost. This is the ultimate power move. Not violence. Not intimidation. Presence without action. Consequence without chaos. Mark feels smaller than he ever has, not because anyone made him feel that way, but because the truth has finally caught up to him. The officers guide him past the line. The Brotherhood doesn't flinch. Mark's face burns as he realizes this is how he will be remembered, not as a manager, not as someone important, but as a man being escorted out of his own life, while everyone watches and understands why. The sound of the door closing behind him feels final, sealing something shut forever. Inside the diner, no one speaks for a long moment. Then, slowly, people begin to breathe again. Remember the laughter when Joan's shirt was torn? Today, there is only silence. The kind of silence that comes when people realize they were on the wrong side. It's not an angry silence. It's reflective, regretful. The kind that forces people to reconsider the moments they looked away, the jokes they didn't challenge, the discomfort they chose to ignore because it was easier. A new order settles in quietly. The owner thanks the staff for coming forward. He apologizes, publicly, sincerely, for not seeing it sooner. He promises change, not in sweeping speeches, but in specific actions, policies, oversight, accountability that doesn't depend on who is watching. Joan isn't there to witness this part. She doesn't need to be. The reckoning was never about spectacle for her. It was about the system correcting itself, about the lie of Mark's power being exposed for what it was. Outside, the motorcycles start up again, engines rumbling low and controlled. The Brotherhood doesn't linger. They don't celebrate. They leave the way they arrived, deliberately, without fanfare. Their role is finished. Mark is driven away in the back of a patrol car, staring out the window at a city that no longer belongs to him. Every familiar street feels different now, stripped of the illusion that once protected him. He is no longer feared. He is no longer in control. He is accountable. And inside the Maple Street diner, the day continues, not unchanged, but corrected. The coffee is poured. Orders are taken. Conversations resume, quieter, more thoughtful. Something has been set right, not by force, but by consequence. Justice, delivered cleanly, leaves room for something better to take its place. Joan returns to the Maple Street diner quietly, without announcement or expectation. The door opens the same way it always has, the bell offering its familiar chime. But this time the sound doesn't make her flinch. She pauses just inside, taking in the room that once felt so small, so heavy. It feels different now. Not because the furniture has moved or the walls have changed, but because the weight that lived here is gone. She isn't here to work. There's no apron in her hands, no shift waiting for her. She's here to collect what's left behind. Her belongings, her final paycheck, the last loose ends tying her to a chapter that has already ended. She walks with steady steps, shoulders relaxed, her presence calm and self-possessed. The staff notice her immediately. Conversations stop. Movement slows. People turn toward her, expressions layered with relief, guilt, and something close to reverence. For a moment, no one knows what to say. The silence isn't uncomfortable this time. It's thoughtful. respectful. The owner approaches first, holding an envelope. He thanks her, simply and sincerely. He apologizes again, not defensively, not to clear his conscience, but because he understands now that apologies matter most when they're paired with action. Joan nods, accepting both the envelope and the moment without ceremony. Then the others step forward. Some of them are hesitant, eyes downcast. Some meet her gaze directly, their shame unhidden. A few voices shake as they speak. They apologize for laughing, for not stepping in, for assuming it wasn't their place. Each apology lands differently, but together they form something real. Joan listens. She doesn't interrupt. She doesn't rush them. When she speaks, her voice is gentle, steady, carrying no bitterness. She thanks them for being honest now. She tells them she hopes they'll remember this the next time someone else needs them to speak up. There is grace in her response, not because she owes it to anyone, but because it belongs to her. No one feels absolved, but they feel changed. Joan gathers the few items from her locker, a mug, a photo, things that once mattered more than they do now. She pauses at the threshold, looking around one last time. This place gave her lessons she never asked for. It also gave her proof of something she'll never forget. She turns and walks out. Lundy is waiting outside. He doesn't stand apart. He stands beside her, not in front, not behind, just there. She takes his arm briefly, a quiet gesture that speaks volumes. Together, they move toward the motorcycle. People watch, but no one stares. Joan climbs onto the back, settling in easily. She wraps her arms around her father's waist, not because she needs to hold on, but because she wants to. The engine starts, a low, steady rumble that feels like promise rather than threat. As they pull away, the diner fades into the background. The girl who walked into that diner months ago was trying to be invisible. The woman who walked out knew she never had to hide again. The road opens ahead of them, wide and unburdened. Joan lifts her face to the wind, feeling it move past her, carrying away the last traces of fear. She doesn't look back. She doesn't need to. What comes next is hers to choose. Time has a way of softening the sharpest moments, but it doesn't erase what they meant. In the weeks and months that followed, the story of the Maple Street Diner settled into something quieter, something lasting. Not gossip anymore. Not spectacle. A reference point. A reminder. Joan moved forward. The money Lundy had been saving for years, untouched and waiting, finally found its purpose. Joan started college, walking into classrooms with the same quiet confidence she once carried trays through a crowded diner. This time, the pressure felt different. Chosen. Earned. She studied with focus, driven not by fear of failure, but by the knowledge that she had options, support, and a future that belonged entirely to her. She didn't introduce herself as a victim. She didn't need to. What she carried with her was something far stronger, self-trust. The understanding that her voice mattered long before anyone else decided to listen. Mark's world narrowed. His name followed him in ways he couldn't outrun. Interviews ended abruptly. Promises of callbacks never came. The reputation he once guarded so carefully had collapsed under the weight of truth, and no amount of defensiveness could rebuild it. People didn't argue with him. They simply stopped opening doors. He learned what so many like him never expect to learn. Power that relies on silence is temporary, and once exposed, it never fully returns. The diner changed, too. New management took over with an awareness forged by failure. Policies weren't just written, they were enforced. Training wasn't performative, it was mandatory. The culture shifted in subtle but unmistakable ways. Staff spoke up sooner. Managers listened longer. The lesson lingered in the air, shaping decisions even when no one mentioned names. What happened there became a cautionary tale passed quietly between businesses, between parents, between people who suddenly understood how easily harm can hide behind authority. And beneath it all was the larger truth. This story was never just about one man losing his job. It was about respect and how quickly it erodes when power goes unchecked. It was about the danger of mistaking silence for consent and politeness for weakness. It was about standing up, not always with fists or fury, but with clarity, patience, and the refusal to let wrongdoing remain private. It was about fathers protecting daughters, not by locking them away from the world, but by teaching them they are never alone in it. By waiting until they choose to step forward, and then standing unshakably beside them when they do. It was about community accountability. About the moment when witnesses stop being passive and start becoming responsible. When laughter gives way to reflection. When people realize that doing nothing is still a choice, and often the wrong one. It all started with laughter in a diner. It ended with a lesson this entire town would never forget. Some people have protection you can't see. And disrespect always comes with a price. If this story moved you, if you believe in standing up for what's right, do 3 things. Subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Comment with someone who taught you to stand up for yourself. And share this with anyone who needs to remember that bullies don't win forever. Because your engagement tells YouTube that stories of justice matter. And we need more of them. This is where the story turns outward, away from names and places, and toward you. Because this was never just about a diner, or a manager, or even a single act of cruelty. It was about power. How it's defined, how it's used, and who we decide to be when we're given it, even in small amounts. Mark believed power meant control. He believed it lived in titles, schedules, authority over someone else's paycheck. He believed power was something you took, something you enforced, something that allowed you to humiliate another person and walk away untouched. And for a long time, the world let him believe that. Lundy understood something different. He understood that real power doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to dominate or embarrass. Real power protects. It waits. It listens. It shows up when it matters, not to destroy, but to correct. Not to take revenge, but to restore balance. And Joan learned the most important lesson of all. That power doesn't mean never being hurt. It means knowing that being hurt is not the end of your story. It means knowing you have the right to say no, the right to speak up, and the right to be supported when you do. This story asks something of all of us. Because most of us will never be Mark. And most of us will never be Lundy. But all of us will be witnesses at some point. We'll see a joke go too far. We'll hear a comment that makes someone uncomfortable. We'll notice the way authority is used not to lead, but to intimidate. In those moments, silence feels easy, safe, neutral. But silence is never neutral. Silence protects the wrong people. Silence teaches bullies that they're invisible. Silence tells victims that they're alone. And every time we choose silence, we quietly vote for the kind of power Mark believed in. This is a story about choosing differently. It's about choosing to speak when it's awkward. Choosing to step in when it's uncomfortable. Choosing to believe people when they tell you they've been hurt. Even if it disrupts the version of reality you'd prefer to keep. It's about understanding that protection isn't weakness. Respect isn't optional. And accountability isn't cruelty. It's care for the community we all share. Mark thought power meant control. Lundy knew power meant protection. Which kind of person are you? The kind who looks away and hopes it doesn't get worse? Or the kind who understands that doing the right thing is rarely convenient, but always necessary? Comment, I choose protection if you're standing with Joan. Comment, I choose respect if you're standing against people like Mark. Let's build a community that doesn't stay silent when someone gets hurt. A community that understands power isn't about who you can dominate, but who you're willing to stand beside. See you in the next story.